On a cold April night in 1912, the most luxurious ship ever built was gliding across the dark waters of the Atlantic Ocean. On board were some of the richest people in the world, along with hundreds of immigrants chasing a dream of a new life in America. The ship was called Titanic, and people believed it was unsinkable. But just before midnight, something happened that would turn that dream into one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. In less than 3 hours, the greatest ship ever built disappeared beneath the freezing ocean, taking more than 1,500 lives with it. This is the true story of the Titanic, the ambition, the warnings, the collision, and the tragic night the unsinkable ship sank. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe and America were connected by one of the busiest travel routes in the world, the Atlantic Ocean crossing. Powerful shipping companies competed to build the largest and most luxurious ocean liners. One of those companies was White Star Line, which decided to create 3 gigantic ships that would dominate the Atlantic. Those ships were Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. The Titanic was built in Belfast, Northern Ireland, by the famous shipbuilding company Harland and Wolff. Construction began in 1909. The ship was enormous for its time, length 882 feet, weight over 46,000 tons, capacity more than 2,200 passengers and crew. The Titanic was designed to be the most luxurious ship ever created. Inside the ship were grand staircases, swimming pools, Turkish baths, elegant dining halls, libraries, and electric elevators. For wealthy passengers in first class, the Titanic felt more like a floating palace than a ship. Because of its advanced design and watertight compartments, many newspapers began calling it unsinkable, but that confidence would later prove to be tragically wrong. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic began its maiden voyage. It departed from Southampton in England, heading toward New York City. On board were more than 2,200 people. The passengers represented all levels of society. In first class, some of the wealthiest people in the world traveled in luxury. One of them was John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in America. Another was Benjamin Guggenheim, a member of a famous industrial family. Meanwhile, in third class, hundreds of immigrants were traveling to America, hoping for a better life. Many came from Ireland, Italy, Sweden, and Eastern Europe. For them, the Titanic represented hope and opportunity, but the ship was also divided by class differences. First-class passengers enjoyed luxurious cabins and gourmet meals. Third-class passengers had much simpler conditions. Yet everyone on board shared the same destiny. As the Titanic sailed across the Atlantic, the ship received multiple warnings about icebergs. Ships in the area reported dangerous ice fields ahead. The Titanic's radio operators received several ice warnings on April 14th. However, the ship continued moving at nearly full speed, about 22 knots. The captain of the Titanic was Edward Smith, a highly experienced sailor. This voyage was expected to be his final journey before retirement. Many historians believe that pressure to maintain speed played a role in the tragedy. The Titanic's crew believed the ship was powerful enough to handle almost any situation. But the ocean had other plans. On the night of April 14, 1912, the sea was calm. The sky was clear, but the ocean was dark and cold. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout named Frederick Fleet spotted something ahead. He rang the warning bell 3 times. "Iceberg, right ahead." The bridge ordered the ship to turn, but the Titanic was too large and moving too fast. Seconds later, the ship scraped along the side of the iceberg. The impact seemed small. Many passengers barely noticed it. But beneath the waterline, the iceberg had torn open several compartments. Water began flooding the ship. Within minutes, the engineers realized the truth. The Titanic was going to sink. The Titanic had lifeboats for only about half the people on board. This was because maritime safety regulations at the time were outdated. Passengers were initially calm because they believed the situation was under control. But as the ship began tilting, panic slowly spread. The crew followed the rule: women and children first. Many lifeboats left the ship half empty because passengers did not realize the seriousness of the situation. Meanwhile, musicians on board continued playing music to calm the crowd. As the water rose higher, chaos increased. People rushed to the lifeboats. Others searched desperately for family members. By 2 a.m., the Titanic was almost completely submerged. The front of the ship was sinking deeper into the ocean. Passengers clung to railings and lifeboats. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic finally broke apart and disappeared beneath the Atlantic. More than 1,500 people were left in the freezing water. The temperature was below freezing. Most victims died from hypothermia within minutes. The silence of the ocean replaced the chaos. The greatest ship in the world was gone. About 2 hours later, a nearby ship called RMS Carpathia arrived at the disaster site. The crew rescued the survivors from lifeboats. Only about 700 people survived. When the survivors arrived in New York, the world was shocked. Newspapers across the globe reported the tragedy. The Titanic quickly became the most famous shipwreck in history. After the disaster, investigations were conducted in both the United States and Britain. The tragedy exposed serious problems in maritime safety: not enough lifeboats, poor emergency training, and a lack of iceberg monitoring. As a result, new safety rules were introduced. One of the most important was the creation of the International Ice Patrol, which monitors icebergs in the North Atlantic. Maritime laws also began requiring enough lifeboats for all passengers. The Titanic disaster permanently changed sea travel. For decades, the Titanic remained lost beneath the ocean. Then in 1985, an expedition led by Robert Ballard discovered the wreck. The ship was lying nearly 12,500 feet deep on the ocean floor. Images of the broken ship shocked the world. Even decades later, the Titanic still fascinates historians, scientists, and explorers. More than a century later, the Titanic remains one of the most famous tragedies in history. Books, documentaries, and films continue to tell its story. The ship became a symbol of human ambition, technological confidence, and the unpredictable power of nature. The Titanic reminds us that even the greatest achievements can be fragile. The Titanic was meant to be the greatest ship ever built, a triumph of engineering and luxury. But on one cold night in the Atlantic, that dream collided with reality. More than 1,500 lives were lost, but the lessons of that tragedy changed maritime safety forever. Today, the wreck of the Titanic still rests in the dark depths of the ocean, a silent reminder of the night the unsinkable ship sank.